Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Ryan Hergott. Super excited to bring you this edition of Sunday Conversations. This week, Billy and I are going to really dive into what does it mean to build a personal brand, and how is that going to help connect you with people that could possibly help your racing career. We're going to really also take a deep dive into how do the skills of real racing and iRacing translate to one another, and can you take what you learn in iRacing and apply it to real life scenarios? So let's pick up the conversation kind of where we left off last week, and Billy's going to get started telling us about how do you build that brand. I probably had 4 or 5 people reach out this week with just kind of some questions on, from different marketing perspectives, or hey,
Sure.
What do you think about this? What have you what kind of questions have you gotten? And I guess maybe, I had said in the email that, I really kind of wanted to dive into the difference in the marketing dynamic, creating a personal brand, like what you really mentioned last week. And then, talking about the legitimacy and really kind of piggybacking on our conversation from yesterday about, where is all this going and how big is it actually getting? Because dude, I didn't know that dude the other week won 40 grand at the NASCAR thing that was on. That's just, that blows me away. That's
40,
awesome.
That a 17-year-old kid paid for college playing iRacing, so that's pretty cool. Or at least college, if he's smart, he paid for college. If he's an idiot, then he paid for about 3 semesters. But totally different subject. But
right, I agree.
I think the brand thing is marketing yourself. Like, look at in real life, I think of like Rico Abreu, Joey Saldana. Those guys have made a really good living off of building a brand. Not so much of them as a driver, but like you see shirts that just say Rico on them, or like the Rico mullet hats. He's built a brand around what he is.
Absolutely. That's it.
Joey with the JS9 hats and all that sort of stuff, because, and like, I think of guys like Chad Baseflug, where years ago he would go through like 5 or 6 different car owners in a year and have 5 or 6 different shirts and all that sort of stuff. And a lot of the stuff that I bought from him was CB98 Motorsports or 98 Motorsports, that sort of thing. So it was branded to himself. I think that's really where a lot of drivers go wrong. They incorporate the car in with it so much, and they don't actually promote themselves as much. So, and especially in like the online world, where really all you've got is your Twitter handle, your Twitter handle, if you've got a Facebook page, like a Twitch stream, that sort of thing, that creates your branding and your online identity. So therefore, when, like mine is a racing helmet with, it's a beer helmet. I mean, it's hokey, but it's cool. It's not, that's kind of like the trademark now. So that's
kind of who you
part
are,
of the branding now.
Yeah, and that's who you are as a person. I mean, there's plenty of people in the world that directly associate with somebody that is doing exactly that has the beer hat, that identifies with that person. And that's, in my mind, really what branding is. It's what identifies you, what makes you recognizable. When you think, make something up like Budweiser, I still think Dale Earnhardt Jr., and he's not driven that car in how many years now?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And it's connecting those dots and identifying.
I still buy Purex laundry detergent because they sponsored an Indy car back in like 1997.
Yeah.
I mean, I go to Menards over Lowe's or Home Depot because they sponsored Indy cars forever. And I think when you can build a brand, you build loyalty to that brand. And once you've built that loyalty to that brand, no matter where you go, people stick with you. So it's not really... so that way, like in Rico's case, if Rico got an offer to go run, I don't know, he got to go run a World of Outlaw car next year that was somebody else's. He already has a gigantic fan base that's going, that already has all the Rico gear, that whenever they go to an Outlaw show, he's already got a fan base. So, where some of the guys, like even Steve Kinzer back in the day, never really created a brand. Everybody just liked him because he was, the All-American badass. But when you can create an actual brand that has a market, that has value, that's really where, and you see it more in other esports more right now, just because they're way farther ahead than what this is.
So let's talk about that. Like, draw me that parallel, like Ninja as an example. Most people know who Ninja is, right? And
absolutely.
As his brand, kind of, let's give somebody like a practical, actionable takeaway here as far as like what they could do to identify a brand maybe associated with somebody else in esports. Like, could you elaborate on that?
Well, I think with somebody like him, with somebody like him, he's got very distinguishable logos and everything that he uses with all the marketing that they do. He's a very entertaining guy, which that's why people watch him. It's
Yeah.
irrelevant that he's good at something. He's a good entertainer, but he surrounds himself with other people that do brand themselves appropriately. Like
Hmm.
Tim the Tap Man, honestly, is one of my favorites. I listen to him a lot while he's at work, while I'm sitting at work in the background, just because a lot of times it's funny. But the way that his branding and stuff is, he's got a stupid bear on eagle wings with something else, but it's just so ridiculous you never forget it.
Hmm.
And Ninja's the same way. So he kind of branched off from, like his professional days playing Halo into streaming. He's kind of built a brand. And in most cases, he knows he's geared more for kids than what,
Sure.
even like I would be. But that brand is then associated with now Red Bull and Mixer, and I mean, the guy signed a deal with Mixer for like 10 years for
It
like
was
10
insane.
million. I mean, it just stupid kind of money.
Yeah.
And it was all because of how he branded himself, even with the way that like the background of his stream looks, the way that he plays, the way that he conducts business, the commercials that he does. He has an audience that he knows he's going for, which is that, you know, with Fortnite, it's anywhere from like an 8-year-old demographic to a
Hmm.
50-year-old demographic. But in generally speaking, it's that 12 to 18 market. And that's where he's kind of shifted it into. I look at like some of the organizations in like the Call of Duty world that are geared more for adults.
Hmm.
Um, Optic Gaming has been around forever. That was like the first one that really kind of took off. And when they did it, they branded like their streaming crews, their content creators, their actual league teams. That OG logo is always, if you've been around esports at all, what it looks like. Um, and even like your bigger brands know that that means something because there's a following of millions and millions of people. And this year they got bought out again or something. They sold out or bought out, whatever. And now they're kind of no more. And so now all those people that were associated so loyal to that brand, they have now, what Optic did was that was so nice and so good for their content creators was they had them create their own brands too. So that way, if something like this did happen, then they branch off and
Right.
do their own thing, and poof, they haven't lost anything.
Yep.
So I think in circling that back in with racing, it goes back into the same thing. If you brand everything around that specific car that you're driving today,
You're right.
what happens when you move tomorrow into something different? Now all of your branding has to change, which
Yep.
if you do it smart and your branding is consistent to you and it's reflective of who you are, that's really where it makes a whole lot of sense.
Well,
So
I think simply it's branding is a psychological. It's a way you make somebody feel. It's a
yes,
psychological dynamic that happens, and like you and I were talking on the phone about a driver yesterday. There's a driver that it's like it just frustrates me. It's like there's things that just make me mad about it, but that's
hmm,
great because you know what? Every story needs a hero and a villain in order to
absolutely.
create a good story. But that's what it is, and that's where I think a lot of drivers they hide behind, oh, I don't want to say the wrong thing, or I don't want, and so they say nothing at all. And as you
Right.
said before, I mean, you can't build a relationship with anybody with your mouth shut. You have to get out and have those conversations, and you need to let people know who you really are, so that way they identify with you. That way they want to support you because, again, to your point, this is the entertainment business, and people want to be associated or entertained. And people don't watch Ninja because he's the best Fortnite player in the world. They watch him because he's entertaining, he's funny, and he hits that
Absolutely.
target market. And I think so many racers could benefit from that because, like you said, man, there's so many cool personalities out there, but they're not telling their story. They're trying to let going around the track fast tell the entire story for them.
I was actually talking with a guy earlier this week and the last week about, he was asking me kind of what benefits he could, and it kind of stemmed from our conversation last week of where how we should approach it. I straight up told him, I was like, dude, your story is incredible. I said, I think that's a polarizing thing enough. And when you can let and generally speaking, he's a fairly private person, but I said when you can let those people into your life, even 5 to 10% of into your life, and go, here I am. You become a quote unquote friend with them, and therefore, even if you don't make a dime streaming, you're going to gain fans at the racetrack. You're going to gain fans that are buying merchandise. You're
You're right.
you're that just adds into what you need to do in order to succeed in racing, because it, like we talked last time, it's not just about a decal on the side of a car, and it's not about winning races. It's about those relationships that you do build. And when you can build those relationships with whoever, you don't know who's sitting behind the screen and watching you. And
Ever.
if you can be personal with them and grow a relationship with them online, it may progress into something to where they may be able to they may not be able to give you $1,000 now, but they may be able to give you $10,000 in 2 years.
That's it. That's
So
it. And I want to share a story exactly to your point, but I was having a conversation with a gentleman who's moderately involved with a USAC dirt team this week, and he's been following a specific driver that runs a different type of sprint car, but he just likes his story online. He likes how humble this guy is. He likes that he sees this guy's working hard. He sees that he's doing something specific to support his racing, and he's doing the very best he can with what he has. And that's this guy's story. That's his story. He came up that way. He struggled, coming up. He learned some lessons the hard way, and he's got a really cool story, and he sees that in somebody else. But he called me. He's like, I've never done this. I don't know how to do this. What am I trying to do? I don't want to just write a check and then poof, the money's gone. And it was just trying to help connect a few dots. So maybe if he does, he's going to end up sponsoring this gentleman for a couple $1,000s. How do we make sure that both he, the sponsor, gets some strong value out of that, and the driver gets maximum value out of that as well? They don't just buy a titanium brake rotor and, well, there was $1,000,
right,
and then
right.
it's gone. So I think there's things that people that are again trying to pursue this, both with iRacing, sim racing, and even in real life. You have to get that story out there. You have to let the world know who you are. And social media is such an amazingly easy way to do that with a community that is so generously engaging. And what I mean by that is I can post a real estate video of a house, and I have to put $25 behind that video to get it in front of enough people to even make a difference. I can, and maybe I get 400, 500 views on that. And that's when I say make a difference, make somebody click on it to go to my website and create a result. Right. Whereas in racing, I can post a cool racing video. It gets 8,000 people that look at it with like 40 shares or something like that.
Yeah. And for basically nothing.
For nothing, because it's such an engaging community. But, I don't see a lot of sponsors leveraging that right now. I know NOS has done a good job. They just came out with a new, commercial they did with Wyndham.
Their Knoxville one they did was fantastic.
Dude, they're doing so much good stuff for the sport. But again, if you want to attract another big NOS, I mean, they didn't come in and spend all that money this year. And I'd love to talk to Lauren, about the dynamics.
Absolutely.
There. But nevertheless, they didn't dump all that money in year one. They started smaller with a couple teams, and then they started getting bigger and bigger as the results started.
Absolutely.
To come in. And that's what I wish more people would. I wish they would recognize that you're not going to get a check for $100,000 to go run a midget this year just because it's awesome. And just because you need it, and just because it costs more than that to do it.
I spent some time when we were in Florida a few years ago running speed weeks. I was down there with Jacob Wilson, and we spent some time with a guy down there that, I've respected him for a very long time. He's always done things on a professional level, but he's always done it the smart way on a very shoestring budget. Like if it was, where some guys were making engine rebuilds after 6 races, he was stretching them to 10 or 12, so he was doing what he needed to do to survive. And he picked up a sponsor a few years prior to that. And then it's just kind of, you could tell that his program was getting better and better. And I'd asked him, how it all came out. And he said, you would absolutely kick me for the amount of exposure I gave him for that first year's check. That first year's check, I lost money on for the amount of races that, he agreed to go to, that he had to go to because of, there was a sponsor commitment, 20 miles away or whatever it may be. But that company then saw the effort that he was putting in and went, okay, wait a minute, we're way in now. And now it's grown to where, I don't know the financials of it, but he's definitely not starving anymore. So it's one of those things, like I said before, just because a guy can't give you $10,000 now doesn't mean that he's not going to be able to in 2 years. And he might be able to give it to you now and just straight up doesn't want to. He's got to feel
Yep.
you out. And
I think that's something else, and not to like interrupt you, but I think you just touched on something so important, is that this is a relationship. When you get a marketing partner, quote unquote, a sponsor, it's a relationship that's established. That person wants to know how you're going to respond, and it's not unreasonable for them to, figuratively speaking, just stick their toe in the deep end and see if it's going to work out before they just go all
oh,
in
absolutely.
on something. That's kind of how business works. I mean, I'm not going to just dump $100,000 into a new marketing approach day one because it sounds awesome. No,
No.
I'm gonna try it out. I want to get some results first, and as results come in, yeah, then I'm gonna keep going in more and more and more as those results start to compound, and I get better at providing value for that sponsor, or et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, we're not in the .com era anymore of Super Bowl ads where I don't remember what year it was, 99, 2000, 2001, whatever year it was, where every Super Bowl ad was either Budweiser, Pepsi, Doritos, or it was some terrible website that nobody was ever going to use, but they invested every marketing dollar they had into spending $2 million on a 30-second ad that everybody was like, what in the hell is that website even for? That
Yep.
nobody then went to. And in racing, it's kind of the same thing. You have to kind of proof of concept, I guess, is what we call it in the line of work that I'm in. It's just proof of concept of sometimes you have to take, I've had deals where literally we've gone for a year and I've made zero money on it. It hasn't cost me anything, but I haven't made any money on it. All you're doing is building a relationship for the future.
Yep.
And it's the same thing with, with racing. It's, I mean, it just kind of blows my mind that some people really haven't figured that out yet. And, like we talked last time, the days of just sponsoring somebody, the ma and pa deals of, your next door neighbor owns a liquor store or something and gives you $300 to put a decal on the side of the car. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
But to me, that's a donation. That's not a sponsor.
Yep.
And sponsors are relationships, and just like in iRacing or, and it's two totally separate worlds. I mean, you're not taking a virtual race car to an open house. So I mean, it's not the same thing. But if you do have a stream, or if you do race in leagues that are broadcast, you can reach out to those broadcasting companies or reach out to the league owners and say, hey, I've got a sponsor that wants to do this. Are we able to do, a 20-second ad? Or are we able to do a promo? Are we able to do, a giveaway to the people that are watching in chat, or whatever it may be? There's always something that you can do there to promote a product or a service that doesn't correlate necessarily to the real life stuff, because it's two totally different medias.
Mm-hmm.
But in reality, it's the exact same thing. So I mean,
is.
It just, even in iRacing, it's more than just a decal on the side of the car. I mean, I can make that go away with one click in Photoshop. So it's really not, it's not that complicated. But in comparison to the real life stuff, it's the exact same thing, just smaller scale right now.
It truly is. And, kind of, taking that to the next point, I mean, the scalability of where iRacing is going, and really and the parallels between what a driver can learn and how they can use it as a platform to help grow their brand, attract more sponsors, and possibly even improve their on-track racing skills. Because one of the things that I think is so jacked up about the model of and antiquated about how racing works is, and yes, you can go rent tracks, but then it's all dusty and it's a crappy track if you're talking on dirt. But the model of racing says, and I'm going to use the sprint car as an example, or hell, a micro. I got to spend $30,000 on a micro to go out there and run 4 hot laps, and that's my first introduction to this. Run an 8-lap heat race, and then I'm going to go, maybe if I make it, run a 30-lap feature, and I've gotten a total of maybe 40 to 45 laps in for the night with no practice against a bunch of other people that are hopefully not driving like fools too. And it's so expensive to learn. And,
absolutely.
And nobody just hops right in and it's good day one. Christopher Bell didn't start winning midget races his first 2 or 3 races. It took some races to get to the level he became.
Yeah, I mean, and when we started racing, when I started racing go-karts, it was Wednesday nights were open practice nights. You went and you ran laps and you burned off a set of tires and you went and got 50 or 60 laps. So that way, when you went to the racetrack on Saturday for the first time, you didn't look like as big of an idiot. Yep. But you put a guy in a sprint car that, maybe they came out of a micro or something like that. maybe they'll do probably a little bit better than, say, a guy that's never been in a race car before. But, you know, in an Indiana sprint car scene, or generally anywhere anymore, you get a sprint car in Indiana, and let's say go to Gas City on a Friday night, you're going to get 3 laps of hot laps on a super greasy track where you're going to learn nothing.
Yep.
8 laps in a heat race, probably 10 laps in a semi, and you've literally spent $1,000 to go get 20 laps and not retain any of it.
Yep.
And that's part of me loves it because I love the challenge of it, but the other part of me says there's no room for growth because it's very easy to get frustrated and it's very easy to get down on yourself. And especially when you're spending that much money to go and run, you know, you could theoretically run all year if you never made a feature and run 120 laps. And that's
true. I never thought of it that way, but that's
I mean,
true.
and that's, you know, even, you know, I go, like when I go with Kyle May, he's got a few races in a midget, and he got a sprint car a couple years ago, but like we went to Putnamville and I was so pissed off. I'm like, drive the damn thing into the corner, man. Like, what is the problem? And then I thought, he literally has 7 races in a sprint car.
Yep.
Like and all of them were on like dry slick racetracks, so it wasn't where you didn't have to hustle it into the corner. And I'm like, okay, back it off here and put things back into perspective of, on a heavy racetrack, he's maybe got 30 laps, you know? So it's like it's very hard to learn. And he's got, you know, 15, 20 races in the car now. Mm-hmm. So we went to Kokomo at the end of the year and he did pretty well, and definite improvement over where he was at. But, you know, but it's the same kind of thing. He spent gobs and gobs of money getting virtually no experience. And I think it's one of the things that if there was a track day for a sprint car or a midget, I think it would be a very good thing, especially for new people.
Yeah.
But also at the same token, it helps when you've got somebody in your corner that actually kind of knows what they're doing. Because if you go out and learn bad habits for 50 laps, then it takes another 200 laps just to break those habits out of your head, and then you're still behind. So it's kind of one of those, I don't know. I've always took pride in the dirt community of going, we go to a new racetrack, we get basically 3 corners to figure it out. And if you didn't, oh, well, you got 8 laps to figure it out now, and so on and so forth. I'm like, you know, when you go to the NASCAR stuff, it's like, here, we're going to practice for 17 days. And then, you know, you've got 800 laps in the thing already. You should be good. And if you're still slow, something's wrong.
Right.
But, you know, I mean, I think that's a big piece of it.
Where do you think drivers, though, can really use iRacing as a benefit? We were talking earlier this week about how, you know, so many of the just fundamental skills of driving, and, you know, going to your story last week about, you know, Ronnie and how he felt like he was literally had been to Eldora before. Mm-hmm. And I truly think, because all these tracks are literally laser scanned, they're so precise. The realism is just through the roof. And I think that the racing is so close. Understanding how to race, understanding when to take a risk and when not to take a risk, so you don't crash after 10 laps, like I always do, you know, so you can actually make it to the end of the race.
Yeah.
And I think it can absolutely teach so much of that. And I believe that so much because, man, you see people that have the skill to do iRacing well, those are truly the same skills that correlate into the real world cars. Exact same skills. It's just there's that financial barrier to do it. And I believe so strongly that, you know, you take an iRacer who's doing incredibly well, and I'm going to go out there on a whim and say this, but they're going to do just as well if I can take James Tiernan as an example and give him a whole bunch more laps, and then I take him into a real world race scene, and he has a legitimate opportunity to learn one day. I guarantee you he'll be running within the top 5 at any local dirt track, because
I completely agree.
Skills.
And I don't say that just about James's because he's a friend or anything like that. There's more guys out there too that are the same way. But, you know, we've had conversations about James before to where it's not just that part of the equation, it's the coachability part of it. There's not an ego there that says, well, I'm a badass on iRacing, so therefore I can get in a real race car. It's like, no, that's not how it works. It takes a minute to get figured out of, you know, that fear factor. Because if you get into a race car for the first time and you are not scared, A, you're not human, and B, you're full of it.
Yep.
Race cars are always scary, and if they don't scare you, you haven't been hurt in one. And
That's true. Yeah, you've not ridden it all the way wide open at
yeah,
Eldora, this far from the wall. Yeah, you've
yeah.
not
I
done
mean,
that.
it's just, but I truthfully think that there's a lot of guys out there that really could transition from a sim racer to a really good open wheel racer or a stock car racer. I know there's a lot of different stories about guys, that rented a hobby stock from their local racetrack or whatever, and they've never been in one before,
Mhm.
and go off and do well. And I think that would really translate into an open wheel car, because you do get, especially with like the VR and triple monitors and that sort of thing,
Mhm.
you do get that. You don't have the feeling of the car breaking traction and getting loose, but you already understand the principle of, I have to get the car in the corner on the gas. I have to get the thing rotated. I have to do this. Then it's a matter of convincing your brain this is okay to do. And truthfully, there's really not much in the game that you can't do in real life. Um, like
I'm gonna give an example of what you just said there, but taking a real world experience and applying it to iRacing. I sucked at Eldora the first handful of times I was out there, and
mhm.
ran on it in iRacing. I've not run at Eldora in real life, but I was talking to Justin Grant about how he runs up on the cushion. I'm like, dude, are you just up there wide open, just wailing it the entire time? And he's like, no, I'm letting up a little bit here, and then I'm using the brake a little bit to maybe pull the front end down. I cannot tell you how much that helped me run a cushion on iRacing. Just that
Oh yeah,
little bit of wisdom and just a little break here directly correlated into iRacing from real racing. And I know the exact same thing applies. And that's how well iRacing is done at just getting the physics of the cars and the realism of the tracks and all of it down so well, I feel.
absolutely. And I think then once you add in, that seat of the pants feel of where you can actually feel the car breaking loose, you can feel, what the steering wheel's doing, you can actually feel, the bump steer in the front wheels and everything else. that all that all then becomes easier, in my opinion. I think now, if you take a kid that's never I think if you take a kid that's never raced anything before, but let's say drove around a yard cart in their yard for 5 years, or took a kid on iRacing for 5 years and put them both in the exact same race car, the iRacing kid's going to be faster,
Every time I
because
believe
he
that.
because he already understands, how to search around a dirt track for moisture. He already knows how to,
Mhm.
running a cushion obviously in real life is way different than running it on iRacing, as far as just getting your brain to go, this is okay.
Well, yeah, there's
But
that fear dynamic you
the
talked
fear
about.
the fear dynamic is probably the biggest thing to overcome. But I truthfully believe that if James got stuck in a midget or a sprint car, or whatever it may be, I think with the right amount of coaching of somebody going, okay, well, here's what you're doing, here's what you should be doing, try to do this.
Mhm.
Or, working with a one-way radio system to where you can talk to him and be like, all right, now go 10 feet further, 10 feet
Real
further,
time
10 feet
feedback. Real
further,
time feedback. Yep.
and give that feedback. I think you could have James up to speed at any one of the Indiana short tracks in virtually no time.
Yeah.
I really truthfully believe that once you get through that overall kind of fear and that shock, um, of once I can remember my first sprint car experience of firing one off for the first time,
I do too.
and
It's real, dude.
it's just like, I mean, truthfully, I lied to get in the damn thing in the first place. They were like, you've ran a sprint car before? I'm like, well, I mean, a little bit.
Yes.
I
Yes.
never, yeah, hell, I'd never even fired one before, and here I'm at a racetrack running I mean, and don't get me wrong, it was nothing special, but and it was on pavement. But man, they went and fired me off, and I'm just like,
Wow.
all right. And then, I'm used to a micro at that point. You stand on the gas and give it a bunch of throttle, and I'm like, okay, this can kill me. This is
Yeah.
kind of cool. And then once you get over that overall fear and awesomeness of it, and just settle in and get into a groove, then you start driving, and then you start learning. And you know that night, truthfully, was one of the best nights of my life, because it really just taught me, you know, Adam Wilfong told me a while ago when he first got a sprint car, and it makes me laugh, of everybody that always says they get into a sprint car, it's nothing like you thought it would be. And he goes, no, it's literally exactly what you think it is. It's a short wheelbase with 900 horsepower, and it's direct drive. what did you think it was going to do? Like, this thing is evil. It's supposed to be evil, and
it's all of that.
It's every bit of it. Whoever designed one for the first time was a sadistic person.
They're
and
crazy.
I absolutely love them.
I love
for
them
it.
too.
but I mean, but once you take a sim racer, I think from that fear factor to a realism level, it makes it totally different. I haven't watched any video of Bergeron doing it, but I know Bergeron picked up Alex Bergeron. He was the World of Outlaw champion this past year and won a lot of races, and he wins a lot of races super fast. And him and his family got a 360 wing car that they run in Canada and in New York, and
that he bought with his iRacing winnings, I heard.
Pretty much,
right?
yeah. Pretty much,
that's
yeah.
Even
Which
better.
is even better.
That's even better.
And he went to a track that the buddy of mine announces at, and he goes, "The boy looks really good." I mean, he wasn't completely up to speed yet, but he wasn't in the way. He was holding his line. He knew where he needed to be.
First time, right?
and getting faster and faster. He did win a race. I think it was last year, where somebody had a 305 sprint car that they basically said, if you win the championship, you get to run the sprint car. And he did. And I guess did pretty well. And then he got his own and got into a 360. And Coleman Gulick actually used to run a lot of USAC stuff and Silver Crown. He actually is good friends with him and believed him enough in his ability to do it, and actually was going to put him in their car this year before he bought their own. So
I love that.
I mean, it really does transition to where I think if you've got a guy that's coachable and doesn't have that ego involved. I know there's some guys in the upper Northwest, some of the Wicked Energy Gun guys, they do a promotion with some of the midget stuff to where a guy can go up there and run a focus midget. I know Adam Elby went up there and ran one. Tim Smith's ran it a couple times. So they really do. There are some companies out there that are really doing this. I don't think they're doing it on a scale where a lot of people are seeing it necessarily. I know they do a good job on their own social medias. But I think if you really truthfully did it, and I'm not saying that they're not serious about it, but I think if you did it seriously of a progression thing of going, okay, well, we're going to have a test day here, not just throw you to the wolves, but you're going to have, one or two driver coaches that are going to be in your ear saying, okay, well, let's do this and progress, just like how you would on iRacing with somebody that's new. I really truthfully believe that you could get them into the top 5 in a midget at Montpelier or sprint car at Putnamville or Gas City or wherever it may be. I think that it's, some may take a little bit longer just because of that fear factor, but I think if you get over that fear pretty quick and start to progress, I think it's possible to be done.
I agree. Let me ask you, just kind of putting a cherry on top of all this here today, and dude, you've shared a lot and I really appreciate it. So, it comes, and I think something you just said kind of helps wrap all this up, that there's so many people out there right now that if they knew who you were as a driver, if they see you consistently enough on iRacing and they get to like you a little bit on iRacing, there is more and more business people that absolutely want to help. And there's an abundance of 30 somethings, 40 somethings that are using iRacing as a platform to race every night because they don't want to go spend the money, and they can't be gone every Saturday night away from their families because they have businesses to run or whatever, that truly want to help. They want to help that kid out or help that person out that they believe in. And I think, how does that person start building their brand? How do they start getting their message out there? Is it just start streaming on Twitch once a week? I guess what would be the first 1 or 2 steps for that person to just start getting their message out there so they can possibly attract that right person that'll help?
I think a couple things. I think streaming definitely helps. I think even if you don't stream, if you post videos on YouTube, another big thing, don't be a jackass on forums and Facebook and everything else. Some of in my opinion, some of the fastest guys on the sim, I couldn't care less about speaking to them just because of the way that they act. And it sucks because a lot of them, if you look at it just on strictly a racing level, they're amazing on there, but their demeanor towards others and everything else throws me off, and I don't want anything to do with it. But I think truthfully, streaming is probably the best way to go because it does put you out there. It does put a face to what you're doing. You know, I've had people come up to me at racetracks that, you know, they were like, "Hey, it's the tuna," you know, I'm like, and you know, I don't expect anything. I don't do it for any other reason than I enjoy it,
Mhm.
but it has put, you know, a face to a car. It puts a face to reality because a lot of these guys, you know, and like in the pro series, I think it's cool that they do
The interviews and the
they do
photos.
have interviews and face, you know, and face shots and that sort of thing because, you know, there are going to be times now when James goes to Eldora or James goes to DeCoin and runs into somebody, they may recognize him. And once you can put a face to a car, a face to a person, that just helps out immensely, in my opinion.
Well, it
Um,
helps bring down the walls of who is this person, and it lets you
right.
come in and get to know them as a person, which is the reason why you buy their shirt, which is the reason why you're going to buy the next shirt that comes out, or you're
Absolutely.
simply going to support them because you believe in them as a person. And
Absolutely.
and that's what branding really is to me, is just you've got to tell your story simply so people know who you are and they can connect with you. And if they connect with you and you connect with the right person, then man, doors can just immediately be opening
Oh,
up. I
absolutely.
tell people in my
Doors.
real estate business all the time, it's like truly you are just one conversation away from your life changing. One
Oh,
conversation.
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I've, you know, even in my work life, I've had deals that have taken a year to go
Mhm.
through where other people said, "I don't know really why you're wasting your time on it." I'm like, just
I'm going to need to eat in a
chill
year,
out.
right? So
I mean, I'm like, there's no reason to throw the towel in on this yet. And, you know, and I mean, it's not, you know, you don't ever want to undersell yourself. I think everybody's got a worth of what they're of
yep.
what they are worth. So you don't give away the farm for free, but by the same token, you really can't. You have to build that. You have to build a relationship with them, and once you do that, that just takes it to the next level. But it also has to be a personal thing. I think a lot of times first, and that's where, at least on the iRacing side of it, I think, you know, whether you stream on Twitch, Facebook, YouTube, or whatever it may be, that sort of thing, it just brings a little bit more legitimacy to it.
Mhm.
I think the unless you're in a pro league, the overall sponsorship thing is pretty weak, as far as that goes, because there's, you know, it just depends on what kind of driver you are. But like for me, the great thing is, if I run a DOB race, let's say on a Thursday night, they normally ran from 9 p.m. till midnight, where I would be on the track for, if all went well, a heat race and a main event. That was it.
Yep.
So I'm on the racetrack twice, and depending on where the camera's at, they may never see you. But I've got 3 hours on Twitch where the people that are coming in are always watching me, always watching my brand, always watching my sponsors, always watching those people that support me.
It's 3 hours
And
of them talking to you and getting to know you, and not and,
absolutely,
and not just watching you drive around the track on a race car, and hoping
absolutely,
that the camera gets that sticker just good enough to where
yep,
you legitimately get a second or two of streaming time.
absolutely.
Anyway, man, we could talk about this
Oh, I
forever.
mean, but that's one of the biggest things of, you know, of the whole streaming aspect of it. And like with everything with the teams that I'm associated with, it's the same kind of thing. The number one marketing tool that I have is the stream. Really, that's the number one thing I have. And it's just a lot easier to promote something that way than it is to go, yeah, I can throw your logo on the side of the car, give me X amount of dollars. It's
Yep,
just not,
it's not the
you
way it
know,
works.
I have 5 or 6 different platforms that, you know, you can promote on that make sense. And the more people that realize that and start to do it themselves, if they want to get serious about it, the better off they'll be.
That's it. Well said, man. Let's wrap this one up today, man. I definitely appreciate your time and having this conversation. Let's keep it moving
Not a
forward.
problem.
Hopefully, we can help a few racers connect some dots and find some dollars to help themselves out, man. That's my goal.
Absolutely. That'd be awesome.
All right,
That'd be
brother.
awesome.
Well, I look forward to talking soon, man. Appreciate your time.
We'll see you guys later.
See you, bud. See ya.